Felicia Pearson Smith from Front Row Conversations, where we have authentic conversations with pastors' wives, ministry leaders, professionals around emotional and spiritual health for purposeful living. I am so excited because we're in the month of March, and March is Women's History Month. And I thought what better conversation it would be, great conversations to have, would be with women who are pastoring congregations. And so we are so excited today to have from Charlotte, North Carolina, Pastor Reverend Tiffany Thomas, and she is the senior pastor. Is it called Try On or Try On? Which one it is?
It's Try On, yeah.
Okay, Try On United Methodist Church. And I just thought, I was so excited because she's a young sister who's making it happen. And as I was putting together this show, I was thinking about Women History Month, and I'm just going to read what I had written down in my thoughts. And I said to myself, as I do often, I am amazed at the accomplishments that women have made and are making. And sometimes, as I've said before, God has placed us in places to break up the ground, to lay the gravel, to spread out the rocks, and eventually pave the way. And so this month on Front Row Conversations, we're talking about women who went beyond the pew and are now in the pulpit. So I'm going to read a little bit about our guest, and just so you'll know who she is today, and we're just going to get right into our conversation. Reverend Tiffany Thomas is a native of Columbus, Ohio. And Tiffany answered the call to ministry at a very early age, the age of 15. She is a graduate of Spelman College. Yay, I like that. And also received her Master's of Divinity from, let me look at here, because I was looking at this and I just said, this is really, really something here. I'm trying to find my place. Yes, from Duke Divinity School. I didn't want to say Vanderbilt. I wanted to say Duke, from Duke Divinity School.
That's right.
And I was really
Duke,
surprised,
right.
Pastor Tiffany, that you graduated 6th in your class from Spelman College, and that lets us know you are a sharp sister. So here you are. We're in your space now, and here you are, a young woman, and I'm sure you've had this conversations a number of times about what it means to pastor a church, not just at your age, but as a church, as a woman. And so let me just lay a little background for our audience here. Bishop Vashti McKenzie, in her book, Not Without a Struggle, notes that women have been paradigm busters a very long time. That is, changing the leadership in the Bible and even globally. The role of women doing this is not new, she says. As a matter of fact, there's a tremendous influx of women into leadership positions in the church and church-related professions. It is definitely on the rise, she says. But she also states more is not better. And she says just because there are women answering the call to the gospel ministry does not make challenging the paradigm of male-dominated ministry any easier. So, Tiffany, if you don't mind me calling you that, just tell us a little bit about your journey, how you initially answered the call, and what have been some of the challenges that you've had to face as a woman in ministry, and particularly as a younger woman.
Well, so I entered the call to ministry at the age of 15, and I would definitely say in response to Bishop Vashti McKenzie's quote, that there has been a generation of women who really opened a lot of doors for my generation. And so when I answered the call to ministry, at first I didn't have a lot of pushback. So the pastor that I worked with in Ohio, that he was really supportive. And then when I went to Spelman College at the age of 18, I told them that that I had this call, and I didn't really know what to do with it. And they were very supportive of it. They placed me with Pastor Portia Wills-Lee, who was pastoring a church in Atlanta, and I worked with her for all 4 years of my college experience, and then immediately went off to Duke Divinity School, where I worked really closely with a Baptist pastor there who was male, and I mean, just I had been in ministry. I was 25 years
Wow.
old, so I had been in ministry for 10 years
Okay.
before someone told me for the first time that women were not supposed to be ministers. That was
How
the
did
first
that
time.
feel? How did that feel, Tiffany, having
I mean,
had that experience?
I was doing it. I had seen it done by my female mentors and leaders, and so I just was like, what era is this? But it's still, so I was really supported by a lot of people, and did not, the first time I received pushback, it was so foreign to me that it didn't impact on me at all, whatsoever.
How did that, where
And
did that pushback come from? And clearly, how did you navigate through that?
well, actually, it was the guy that I was dating at the time,
Oh,
and he was right.
okay.
And so it was really strange. And he had gone to divinity school as well, and he was in law school at the time, and he was saying that he was going to start a church, and that he, really wanted to pursue a relationship, but that he did not believe in women in ministry. And so if I were going to be with him, I would have to, accept that God does not call women to be ministers, and that I would have to accept my role as first lady, that would the right and the theological place for women, and that would be the place in his life. And so I laughed at him. I'm sure that wasn't appropriate, but
Uh-huh. That is an interesting
and
story
needless
that
to
you
say,
can share that. Yes, go ahead and finish. Go ahead.
needless to say, it didn't work out. But that was the first time in my life that
Mhm.
someone told me, that this is not right, that God does not call women, that you are in the wrong place. That was the first time that I'd ever received any pushback.
Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you this, because it sounds like you've been in a healthy space as you are navigating and working out your ministry, unlike so many of us my age.
Right.
People, I mean, there was no support in my earlier years and no models for women in ministry and that whole concept. So it's kind of like I had to have a conversation with myself, around this role. And then it's interesting that I also wear the hat of a pastor's wife, first lady, as well as a licensed and ordained minister. And that's a whole nother show, depending on which shoe, which hat I have on at that particular time. But emotionally, would you say, how have some of that was your first challenge? So if I'm hearing you correctly, are you saying that's the only, to use your word, pushback that you've had as you've been a young woman in ministry? What about some of your female sisters and friends?
No, yeah. So I think that I have, and it's because I think Spelman College put me in a place. They tried really hard to put me in a place where I could grow, and really nurtured me in that sense. Pastor Lee at Trinity Tabernacle was very nurturing. I know a lot of people who did not have that sort of mentorship, and who did
Mhm.
not, and grew up with a lot of challenges in that sense. So when I
Okay.
went off to grad school, I sort of had this confidence and courage, because I had been raised up and reared up by a mentor, which is, I think, those mentor relationships, they happen a lot among men in ministry, but it's
Right.
much harder to do for many various reasons for women. And so I met a lot of women who did not have people to support them, and faced a lot of challenges about identity. So I think that
Mhm.
that was the best thing for me, is that I worked a lot with my identity, and what does it mean to be female, and what does it mean to be
Mhm.
called to pastor, and what does
Mhm.
it mean to be doing both of those things in the South, because that's a whole nother bag
Yes,
of worms,
definitely.
region. but having people and other women in leadership there to sort of help you form your identity, I think is invaluable. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't have that yet.
Why do you think, and you had said something that you were fortunate enough to have mentors in your life and other women who you saw that could do this, but some of the conversations that I'm having, I'm not a pastor in the sense that I'm responsible for the overall of our congregation, but I serve as an executive pastor. Or director of
Okay.
administration here with my husband in ministry. And one of the conversations that I've had, even with your mentor, Reverend Lee, is that what do you think are some of the barriers from women in ministry, female pastors connecting? There seems to be a lack thereof in terms of true connection. Because when you talk to them, most of them say, well, no, I'm just, I don't have the time. It just has not happened. It does not happen, or it's not a positive thing. What do you think? And I guess my whole question is around community. What hinders that community?
Right. And Pastor Lee and I have spent a lot of time talking about that. I think that there's lots of things that go on that place barriers between women making relationships with other women.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things is that women are responsible for their lives and the lives of others in a way that it really does take a lot of time.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
women are, if you're the pastor of a church and if you have a family and children and you're trying to get them back to school and visit the sick and get communion prepared, then you really are just trying to survive. There's
Okay.
not a lot of reach down and pull up or
Mm-hmm.
pull up to come
Mm-hmm.
down. So just that a lot of women in ministry are on survival mode and will
Okay.
find
Okay.
themselves in survival mode a lot. I think that is a big one. I think also that although, just like Bishop Vashti McKenzie said, that even though there are more women accepting their call to ministry, there aren't more spaces open for women in ministry. And so I think that there is a feeling of competition that sort of keeps
Mm.
women from being able to create authentic relationships, because if I mentor you or if I work with you, then you might take my job one day. Like there's a little bit of that, or that there's just not space, there's not room enough for all of us here, and I've worked like hell to get here, and I have to
Okay.
keep my spot. I think that feeling of scarcity keeps women from being able to create genuine relationship. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I think that women have been taught and trained up at a very young age to hate other women. Just
Isn't that
women have
something?
trouble
Yes.
getting along with other women. Yeah, and
Right.
so it's just general, just general threatening behavior. It's
Okay.
really interesting, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a general thing. Women have trouble getting along together, but in particular, it shows up in ministry um, because you see that women just, I hear a lot of women ministers say, I have to work with a male minister, I don't get along with female ministers, blah blah blah.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
think that is some internalized oppression that
And
we're
and
taught
I
to
think
hate
you're
each
right
other.
about
Yeah.
that. And sometimes, and I found my tenure at Spelman to be very positive in terms of what it means to create community with other sisters. And I often tell people this because you do hear that a
Mhm.
lot. Well, I don't get along with women, and all my friends are male, and you can't trust
Right.
women.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
catty. They keep mess go. But you know what I always say? Well, if
Right.
you feel that then you be the first one. You be that one that shows and models what it means to
Right.
have authentic sisterhood. Then let it start with you. Well, let me ask you this question. It's interesting you should bring that up.
Right.
What have you done in your own life? And then we're going to talk about some things that you're doing there in your church, but I want to talk about your being before I get into your doing. What are you in your
Okay.
own life? How are you creating community? How are you maintaining balance in your own personal life?
So in my personal life, I've worked really hard to make sure that I have a personal life. Number
Okay.
one, when you are the only when you are only pastor on staff, it can become cumbersome.
Yes.
But I try, like, I take Fridays off and I take Mondays off, which it's weird that they're at the opposite ends of the week.
Mm-hmm.
But it works for me for whatever reason. And my congregation, it took them a little while to get adjusted to that at first.
Mm-hmm.
But now they know, like, do not call me on Monday. I mean, you have to be dead
Good
for me
for
to
you,
answer the
Tiffany.
phone on Monday.
Good for you. Good for you.
And the same, right? And the same with Fridays. I am not available. Even though Fridays I'm usually probably working, preparing for a sermon or what have you, but I'm not at the church. And I'm really intentional about taking vacation, and I'm really intentional about keeping community that is not related to the church. I have a really, I think, a good relationship with the community within, but I have friends and places where I'm a part of that I'm not in charge. I'm not the leader. I'm just a member of a community. So a group of friends, a network of people where I'm not the head of it and I don't have to make all the decisions or what have you. And so that's been really good. I work out pretty regularly, and that keeps not only keeps me fit, but it keeps me emotionally, it keeps my stress level down. And I try and watch what I eat. I try to. I work in a black church in the South. There's a lot of fried chicken.
Yes,
I am constantly hiding from them.
Yes.
And I try and stay healthy, mentally, physically, spiritually. I think that's a part of my job, to model that I have to take time to do that for my congregation, to model that for them, that is what
Tiffany,
God calls us to do.
Listen, I'm saying, like, maybe I should have had a conversation with you about 40 years ago, girl, because you really have it together. And what happens, the things that you have just said are things that many of my peers, we're in this season of our life, we're saying, we need to take vacation. And it doesn't need to be related to the church conference or the church youth convention. It took us a minute to figure that out. We need to rest. We need to establish healthy boundaries. I need for you to do a workshop, and everybody in it needs to be over 50 years old and over 30 years of ministry, because what has happened, we're so unhealthy, and that's my platform, is around this whole emotional and spiritual health. And it's not that I intentionally came out with my platform is going to be emotional spiritual health. I was forced to it because I realized that I'm unhealthy and I need to work on my
for my birthday.
Go ahead.
For my birthday, I'm going to the Dominican Republic, and I will be there for a week, and I'm not bringing my cell phone. Like, my church already knows that whatever happens, I will not be there.
Okay.
For a week.
And
I think
they can hold off. Right.
And that,
right. Definitely.
But no, and so it did, and again, that took me a while to get there. I have a counselor that I go to regularly.
Okay, say that again.
And I have people in my life.
I want you to say that again for the audience. I'm sorry to cut you off, because I'm big on that. Everybody needs to sit on the sofa sometimes. So say that piece again and how that has helped you. Go ahead.
I said I have a counselor that I go to regularly. I go weekly. And then, like, sometimes we'll get to the place where I'll go twice a month, but sometimes I'll have to go every week and just have someone to talk to and to vent in a place where I don't have to have it all together. Or I can be working out my own emotional and personal life and spiritual life. She's really key to keeping me sane and emotionally astute. She holds me accountable to my actions and taking my own temperature for my emotional health. And
That is
so
awesome. Now
it
let
is
me ask
definitely
you,
really
yeah, I
necessary.
mean, I'm loving this. I'm like, well, Lord, this is a sign that I must be having the right conversation because sometimes with my generation, it's like we just need Jesus, honey, and that's all we need. And what I have found, listen, it is not enough. Yes, Jesus is who we need, but there are some other things that we need to do in our lives so we can take on Jesus. And what I want to say to that piece, when you're talking about taking care of your emotional health, your spiritual health, how have you found that to help you in ministering to your congregation? Let's talk about your inside work, the preaching and the pastoral care. Say more about that.
Yeah, so I find that fi- taking care of myself emotionally helps me to be present to my congregation in a way that is healthy. So I am not needing things. I think sometimes as a pastor, you're
Hmm.
there to serve the congregation, but if you get to a place where, like if your emotional needs aren't being met, or if you're not taking care of yourself, then you will find yourself getting your needs fulfilled by your congregation rather than the other way
Girl,
around.
girl, now
And
you know
so,
that's a whole nother talk show. Go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off, girl.
right, right.
Go ahead.
And so for example, because I go to a therapist every week, I don't use the pulpit as a time of therapy. Like I use the pulpit as a time to preach, and
Girl.
there's no in between. And so um and I think, for example, pastoral care, that there's a lot that takes a lot to journey with people when they're in crisis, or
Hmm.
and I work in a community where there is lots of crisis, and they come to you needing help, and you might not be able to help them, and like that takes its toll on you, and being able to sort of work through that, and not shut down. So, because it could take so much toll on you that you could become callous and just not allow yourself to feel what is happening or be present to people, because you've just felt or experienced too much. And so, trying to maintain my own where I am helps me to be present to my congregation in ways that I would not be able to be if I wasn't taking care of myself. And so, when I take
Awesome.
time away, or when I have to go away, they know that ultimately I'm doing this for you, that you have gain in me staying healthy. Because if I burn out, then nobody is going to be helped by that. And
Tiffany,
so,
girl, you're on your way,
yeah.
honey. I mean, it's so good that you are finding this out earlier. Say a little more about the community that you are ministering in outside of the walls of Tryon United Methodist Church. Say a little more about that for us.
Yeah, sure. So, I South Tryon Community Church sits in a community on, if you're familiar with Charlotte, it sits on the corner of South Tryon and Remount Road. It's about 10 minutes south of Uptown, or downtown. Um, and it straddles, the church itself straddles two very depressed or high crisis communities. And so on
Hmm.
the left side, a community called Southside Homes, and it is a really massive public housing community. And then on the right side is Brook Hill Communities, which is also a really massive, either low income, or they also work with public housing authority. And so the church is a mission, so
Okay.
it is set there to sort of to attend to the spiritual and the physical, the real life needs of the people. And so we spend a lot of time working with people who can't pay their rent, people who who have become homeless, or trying to keep people from becoming homeless. We deal with a lot of people who are housing insecure, food insecure, whose children are housing insecure and food insecure. It is massive. And we have particularly just recently have been working in great detail with the homeless population that is rising in the city of Charlotte and finding ways to attend to their needs. So we're always at work with those who don't just need Jesus, but need other
Okay.
stuff too,
Okay.
like bread
Okay.
and a bed and things of that
Okay.
nature.
All right. And
Yeah.
when you entered this congregation, and I was just reading something about the former pastor, and when you took over this congregation, was this congregation already mission focused? That's my question. And then the second thing, how were they able to, were they accepting to your coming there? Such a young woman with a lot of vision, a lot of passion. Can you say more about that journey?
Yeah, so it was a mission church since its inception. It is going on, I think, 14 years old.
Okay.
And it's when it started, it worked really closely with another United Methodist church, Myers Park United Methodist Church, and that's a church that has a lot of money. They're on like a great side of town, and they were trying to figure out how to do more ministry in this community that really needed help. And so they worked with the previous pastor, his name is Charlie Rivens, and they started that church right there in the community. And the point of its mission statement was to provide the community needs as well as the spiritual needs. And so it has always been a mission church. And it doesn't raise its own funding. I mean, we raise our own money, but about 80 or 90% of our operational expenses actually comes from another church that is supporting the ministries that are happening there.
Mm-hmm.
And we raise our own money and we find grants, et cetera, et cetera. But the people are in so much need that we wouldn't be able to keep the doors open if we had to rely on our own, like our tithes and offerings alone. And so it's a really interesting relationship. But when I came there, everyone was nervous. Everyone was nervous about how it would go because it's a tough community, and they, like, people get robbed and shot and blah blah, and they were really nervous about what was gonna happen when I was 25. I had not had my 26th birthday yet.
Wow.
And everyone, like my district superintendent, the bishop, and the community, and everybody was concerned. But when I got there, I mean, the community just took me in and held me close, and I think they've always been like that from day one. And I think one of the reasons is because the previous pastor and I, whom they loved, I mean, Charlie Rivens is a hero in that community, and they were very sad to see him go, because we're Methodist, so we're itinerant, and so they were very, very sad to see him go. But because he and I are so very different, I mean, we are as different as two human beings could possibly be. Because of that they could love me without feeling unloyal or disloyal to him.
Okay, that's wild.
And so I think that it was great. Yeah. And so
Hey, let me ask
they were able to take hold of me and sort of protect me.
Okay, no, I was going to say, as you were telling that story, because what I thought about when you were saying, when you went there, are the majority of your congregants, I don't even know whether that's the word, are they a part of the community, or are they commuting in, driving out? What's your demographics for the church there?
Yeah, it's community based, so the majority, they are a part of the community. They walk to church. We have lots of children. We have it's our second greatest population is children under 15.
Wow.
And we had, I think, 40 last Sunday, and they all walked to church. And and so it is a community based church. It's set up for those in that area.
Well, as you are impacting lives there, inside the church, outside the church, and the opportunity to influence, I'm thinking about the girls, the young women, the middle school girl, the high school girl,
Yeah.
that's looking to you as a model and saying, you know what, if she can do that and know who she is, this is what I can do too. So I always have to ask this question: what voices, and I don't mean voices in your head, like in a negative way, but what voices did you hear as a girl that enable you to walk out who you were called to be, to do ministry, to be who you are? Who were those voices? Who were those women or men in your lives early on that influenced Tiffany Thomas?
Let's see. I think there were a lot of voices, of course. As a black female, I'm gonna start with my mother, and
Yes.
she was a she's very strong in her, her own sense of calling. Now, she's not a minister, but she was a
Mhm.
social worker.
Okay.
And she not only did so, I think that social workers are their own kinds of ministers. I'm
Mhm.
sort of watching her dedicate her life to then she worked in child advocacy, and so she was really committed to that. But also, she worked in the church, and she had this soup kitchen that she ran really
Wow.
from the time that I was very small till even after I went to college. So I worked in that soup kitchen regular
Wow.
every Saturday. That's just what we did. Saturday mornings we worked in the soup kitchen. That was really forming for me.
Mm.
And that left a big mark on me. And I just knew, even as a child, that the work that I was doing in that soup kitchen was the most important thing that I could be doing. And I think that that model really shaped me. And then also, I would say my father, who is Roman Catholic, he's a
Wow.
very devout Catholic, and I would go to mass with him. My mother worked on Sundays, and so up until I was about 12, I went to mass with my father, and I remember telling my parents I was sort of, I accepted my call at 15, but I was sort of
Wow.
like feeling it out. I started talking about it with my parents when I was about 12, 13. I was trying to say, I have this sense that, I'm supposed to do something in the church. And I remember both of my parents saying, okay, that's great. What do we do? How do we get you involved? And so having the support from my both my mother and my father, that was those were two voices that said, whatever you want to do, we're behind you. I had teachers in high school who really pushed me academically, and who really pushed me even further than I probably wanted to go at the time.
Right. Uh-huh.
To make sure that I had I went to a public school. I had a really good, solid public school education, and people who said, we want you to be prepared for the world that you were going forth in, who forced me to write well and to read critically before I even went to college. And I think that I really stand on their shoulders as well. And then in college, I was surrounded by women who were very firm in their own identity in the ministry. So the Dean Rhodes at
Yes.
Spelman
Yes.
College, and
Yes.
Melville
Yes.
Sampson at
Yes.
Spelman College, like women who knew what it was to be a minister, who stood in that, who did not, who were unapologetic about it, and who encouraged me to be unapologetic about myself, about how I wore my hair or how I wore my clothes, that I could still be a minister and not have to pretend to be someone else. Those and Portia Lee, who really helped me to. She loves to tell this story about when I was in college,
Okay.
and I was a member of the marching band, and I was the baton twirler, and the uniform was tiny, like you're
Oh,
almost
I
naked,
know the uniform.
and
Okay.
right, and right, yeah, and so I remember,
Uh-huh.
and I took it to her and said, can I be a minister and wear this at the same time? And she was like, yes, girl, you better be happy you can fit into that. And so, and then, like,
Exactly.
making me feel okay, making me feel okay about,
Uh-huh.
being a human,
That's
and
awesome.
people washing and waiting for me to grow. Because I mean, I made a lot of mistakes, and I was a teenager, and I was a young adult, and no one ever made me feel bad about that. They said
That's
you
good,
can be a
Tiffany.
minister and be a young adult at the same time.
That's
And
good.
so that has really helped me as I continue to develop, that I don't have to feel bad about, who I am or where I am in my life, and I don't have to try to be someone that I'm not, or try to accomplish things before my time, and then have to undo them later
That's
in life.
awesome.
So it
Girl,
has been
you have
helpful.
helped me. I won't even have to go see the therapist this week. You have. No, because it's so critical because we come to this point, and I'm probably your parents' age, if not older, but we come to this point where we're like, man, if I had just known that. We learn from our lessons. And I had a guest on once that said, though, it was important for her to have people in her lives that knew the way, that had traveled the way, along with people in her lives who were her peers, and the two were walking
Right.
together. And I think that's a great piece that you've had those persons in your life. I have two more questions to ask you before we wrap up this conversation. This has just been a joy. It has just been my pleasure to have this conversation. Seminary,
Yeah, sure.
what made you, because sometimes, in our world, people will say, girl or guy, you don't have to go to seminary. It doesn't take all of that. What made you see the need for additional training beyond college? As it relates to ministry. I mean, you went to Duke Divinity. That's a great school. What can you say about that, and what would encourage someone else who may be thinking, well, I have a call, but I don't think I need all of that. Can you say a little about that?
Yeah, sure. So, when I went to college and I went to Spelman Sisters Chapel and told them that I wanted to be a minister, I mean, the first thing they said was, "Well, then you're going to seminary school." And they were funded by the Lilly Endowment, and what we would
Right.
do every spring break was we would go and travel. We would have something called the Seminary Swing Tour, and we would
Mm-hmm.
go all over the country and visit seminaries and understand what they were about, and the differences between them. And we went I think every spring break except for my senior year, because I said, okay, fine, I'm going to seminary. Please let me go to the beach one time. Like, I just want to go to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And so as soon as I began to formulate and articulate my call, almost everybody said, then your next step is to be trained and become a licensed professional in the skill that you are choosing. At when I was a mentor, or when I was a mentee at Pastor Lee's church, she was American Baptist. She is American
Right,
Baptist,
right.
and I was being trained up to be ordained in that tradition. And in that tradition, it's a requirement, I believe, for you to pursue a master's of divinity. Um, and so we had decided before I could get ordained, before she would
Mm-hmm.
ordain me, that I would go off to school and get my master's of divinity. And so it so many people around me said that if you want a successful career, then you have to have the tools, just like any other professional
Yes,
career. You have to be
yes,
trained in your field.
yes, yes.
And I think that's true for anything, to be trained. And I'm glad that I am trained, and that
Okay,
I
so
did, and
Tiffany, if you
opened all
could,
the doors.
okay, I'm sorry, if you could say one or two things to say. Gail Sylvia show, whether it's audio or visual, these shows are shown all over the world. Her mission is to empower women and girls through digital media. And I think even though it's sometimes we have our little problems getting on, but it's a wonderful tool globally, in this country and globally. So if you could say something to a girl, a woman, a sister that may be contemplating this call within her, what to do with it, what would you say to them?
I would say, to a girl or a sister or a woman, to go to a church where they need help.
Mm.
Um, one of the things that gave me the most experience and was the reason why I was called to be a senior pastor at 25 was I was trained up in small local churches where the pastors need help.
Come on,
And it
girl.
doesn't matter if you're a woman or if you're a teenager, they need somebody to teach Bible study to the kids, or they need somebody to help lead Sunday school, because pastors have to do a lot. And it's a great place to sort of work it out and experience it and get your hands dirty to see if it's really for you. I find a lot of women in ministry, their first instinct is to go off to those mega churches where there are tons of ministers and tons of people on staff, and they don't need your help. And so there's no way for you to experience what it actually is. And yeah, you might get to preach or teach a class once a year or so, but there are so many small churches where they would love for you to just experience or experiment. I got a lot of opportunity to develop Bible studies at 15, 16. A lot of opportunity for leadership just because it's a small place that had a lot of need. And so if anyone, teenager, young, older, like second career, go find yourself a little local church. Tell them that your commitment and your interest, and watch the vineyard grow.
That is
It happens, and
awesome.
it will happen.
Oh my God, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just awesome, awesome. Well, you have heard it here in this month of March from Reverend Tiffany Thomas. I'm so honored to have this conversation with you. And Tiffany, we're closing out, and I always close out with this scripture. And I was an Old Testament girl in seminary. That was my focus. And I happened to just fall upon this scripture in this season of my life, which is taken from Philippians, and Philippians 1:6, and just my paraphrase, and says, be confident of this, that God, who began a good work in you, will bring it to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. And that is so important to me.
Amen.
I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy, busy schedule to do this. I want to say a special thank you to Gail Silvio from SilviaGlobal.com for her wonderful ministry organization empowering women and girls through digital media, having authentic conversations on a number of issues, a number of areas, and I happen to be under the faith tab. And so, Gail Sylvia, thank you for this opportunity. Reverend Thomas, thank you, thank you, thank you. Got to get you back because, girl,
Thank you.
you need to do some training for, like I said, to be a part of your training. Everybody must be 50 and older to hear what you have to say, because you are off to a great start. And I know God, who began a good work in you, Tiffany, is already bringing it to completion. God bless you, Tiffany. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Amen.